So, Jim, tell me a little bit about you. Tell my uh, the video watchers a little bit about who you are and what makes you tick.
I don't know what makes me tick. That's a mystery. I My father kind of dealt with those kind of issues as a profession, and I remember him telling me when he was 91, he said, "I think I'm almost starting to figure myself out." So uh, I'm retired. Retired about 3 years ago. Um, I went to college, and in my junior year, somehow I've got the bug about stock market and started reading books about it. I was really fortunate. The university I was at, they had a fellow who was a pretty big name on Wall Street, and he was, we're young. I think he was in his 70s. Uh, Maybe been a little younger than that, but he was a retired investor, and he was endowed with a chair. He could teach one class a year, and he had about 20 students in it. And I was very fortunate to get into his class. And I don't remember a lot of what he told me, but he was very influential. About the third or fourth class, he said, "What do you guys think? I've been thinking about maybe I'll invite some of my friends in to kind of talk to you guys." And we thought, sure, why not? Who could that be? And so the next day, when I went to class, I was greeted at the door by the Secretary of the Treasury. That was pretty much the caliber of his friends. So it was a very enlightening thing. And when I graduated, I interviewed with some firms that he recommended, and they were advertising for analysts, but this was in the 73, 74 recession, which was, for us old timers, just as bad as what we went through in 2008.
Yeah.
And it was pretty hard to find a job, and they may have said they wanted analysts, but they really wanted salesmen. And that's not me. I'm far from being a salesman, and I was lamenting about it to some of my friends, and they gave me a quote, I think came from Einstein, said, and this is not even going to be close to the quote, but that the real success in life is just to lead a calm and modest life. And that kind of resonated with me. And so I went back to my hometown, which was a good move on my part because I met a very special girl and we got married. And she's just a fabulous wife. Life throws a lot of balls at you. Some are fastballs right down the middle and you get hits off them. Some go over the fence. But it also throws a lot of curveballs that just drop out of the sky, or some really nasty change-ups. And nothing better than to have a beautiful woman who thinks you're about 10 times smarter than you do standing beside you during those times. And Jane's been that for me. We have 6 kids, all of them fabulous, far better than their dad. Very proud of them. And we have 23 grandchildren. And I hope the kids don't get mad at me, but the grandchildren are better than their parents too. So family tradition being carried on there. So anyway, I was always interested in the stock market. Didn't go to Wall Street. Glad I didn't. Ecstatic that I didn't. But I read a lot of books and tested a lot of systems and did a lot of research in my spare time. And I don't know if it's still true, but at one time I think I knew every strategy and tactic that was being used. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I ran across a statement by an author, and I can't remember his first name. His last name is Sturgeon. And he proposed what became Sturgeon's Law, and it says 90% of what is said about anything is crud.
Yep.
And in my estimation for Wall Street, 90% is way too low, and crud is way too polite.
That's right.
There is just a lot of noise and garbage that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I experimented with a lot of things. The teacher I had that I referenced, he used to tell us over and over again, the stock will bottom when the last bearish guy sells his stock, and the stock will top when the last bullish guy buys his stock. And so that kind of headed me down psychological things. And I had a girlfriend at the time that his father subscribed to a newsletter that followed psychological indicators. And so I'd get the old copies of that. And so I kind of followed that for a while, but that's hard to do, because one level that was bullish 5 years ago isn't necessarily where bullish people are now. And those were indicators that were inconsistent. And I went through all kinds of stuff. I knew you were going to ask me this, so I tried to recall some of the stuff I did. The one that I really liked was, I got a hold of a book, and the guy's written a recent book in the last year or two, Ed Thorpe. And he wrote a book, I think, A Man for All Markets or something like that. But he wrote a book called Beat the Market.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a hedging program where you would select warrants, you'd sell short the warrants, buy the common stock, and you made a graph, and if the warrant was in this certain spot on the graph, you would it would kind of tell you how many warrants to short against 100 shares and that type of thing. And here I am, I've got 6 kids, and I don't have any money, but I had a few $1,000s, and Radio Shack came out with their first little personal computer, and I programmed that computer to do his formula. And I remember I used that for about 1.5 years, and I never had a losing trade. It was a moneymaker. And then all of a sudden, options became very popular. Warrants kind of disappeared, and they came out with the Black-Scholes pricing for options, what can be applied to warrants. And the whole thing just crashed. Everybody could do it now, and if everybody's doing it, it doesn't work. And I remember doing that. I got hooked on Benjamin Graham, and then of course on Warren Buffett, and I did investing that way. The security analysis book, got a hold of an old copy of that. Those were pretty hard to find at one time. And I would try to back engineer what Buffett had done. He bought this stock and made all kinds of money, and he bought it here. And I'd look at the financial statements at the time he bought it, and I couldn't figure out what he saw at that time. I couldn't duplicate what he was doing. But it was a good way of making, you'd at least match the market, and I'd have fun. It's kind of an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
And I remember I was visiting some of my kids while they were going to the university, and I needed to read something on the plane home. And I dropped by their bookstore, and I had seen the book before, uh, and it's the book we all know, Joel Greenblatt's You Can Be a Stock Market Genius. And I had passed over that thing because I thought that had to be nonsense hype of some type, some investment service that they were hyping. But it was just a plane ride home, and so I got a copy, read it. Um, it was something I hadn't really even, I didn't even know what a spinoff was. And I can't remember when this was. It was around 2000, 2001. Spinoffs were a little hard to find. They're not like now, they're pretty easy to find, but then it was a little hard. And I was still doing the Benjamin Graham Buffett stuff, and I found a spinoff. And so I looked at its financials, and I, started turning the pages of the book, trying to figure out, am I doing this right? And I had no confidence whatsoever. But I found a spinoff, and didn't have much money. I bought, I don't know, 400 or 500 shares. I do remember the name. It was Marine Products. And I think they spun off in 2001, 2002. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the financials, and I remember saying to myself, you got to be kidding. I'm missing something here. This is too good to be true. This thing was wildly undervalued.
Yeah.
And I should have gone back and tried to pull up the records before you and I talked, but I thought it was worth about 3 times more than what it was selling for. And I thought that was a no-brainer valuation. So I bought it, and I made 3 or 4 times my money on it.
Wow.
In probably a year, something like that. And I sold it, and it kept on going up, But like I said, spinoffs were hard to find. I couldn't, the SEC, the Edgar, the SEC filings, the forms, they weren't as organized as they are now. And you really had to do a lot of hunting to get to a Form 10. And I recall I ran across a guy, his name was Bill Mitchell. And Bill was a computer guru. He had figured out how to mine the SEC filings, and he started a service on special situations, mostly spinoffs. I think he called it the spinoff and reorg profile or something like that. And every month he'd publish a 6, 7, 8 page discussion paper, white paper, whatever you want to call it, and he'd make a recommendation, and he'd tell you why he was making that recommendation. And since I was working full time, it became my crutch. And I would read his letter and probably invested in half of what he recommended. Mm-hmm. And he taught me a lot. And but he stopped publishing in 2014. And in fact, I could tell something was going on because the quality of his dictum, quality of his writing was going down. And sure enough, he was off setting up his own hedge fund, doing this kind of stuff. And he was doing the legal work at the time. So that was great. I had a guy that was smarter than me, and we kind of he was kind of showing me the way, and I was looking at what he was doing. Yeah, he kind of gained confidence with that. And, we made some money, we lost some money.
Yeah.
We went through 2008 together.
Well, what was it like investing in spin-offs? Actually, no, before we move on to that, I want to go back to what you were saying about your wife.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that the best investment that I ever made was the time that I've spent with my wife and getting to.
Oh, absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
and I when I think about uh, investing money is child's play compared to investing time with my spouse and doing, in my view, what's right by her. Um,
Yeah.
so I think you and I are kindred spirits to a certain extent in that area. So
Yeah, we, right from the very beginning, when we met each other, it was just real. There was no pretending, there were no pretenses, nobody's putting on a show. And with ours, we were talking very deep personal stuff and really enjoying each other. So it was a hit from the beginning. But I recall one time, uh, and it's not too long ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, we were put into the newlywed game, and there was a just married couple, a couple that hadn't been married very long, and then us, and we had been married probably close to 40 years at the time. And one of the questions was, and it was the last question, the one that for all the points, right?
yeah,
It was the question of which one of the two of you will say you got the better deal. And we both answered it that I answered it that I got the better deal. She answered that she got the better deal. And I think that's indicative of a good marriage is when you both think you got the best part of the deal, and
yeah, yeah,
you make it work.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll have to ask my wife that sometime. See what she thinks. So,
Have somebody else ask it.
yeah, yeah, probably. Yeah.
And she has to go out of the room while you answer, and you have to go out of the room while she answers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Well, I already know my answer. I definitely got the better part of the deal. So she's she's pretty amazing.